Breaking news, eNCA can confirm that Shrien Dewani will be extradited from the UK on April 7th or 8th. He's expected to land at Cape Town International Airport the next day. Dewani is accused of masterminding the murder of his wife Annie while on honeymoon in Cape Town in November 2010. He has been fighting his extradition to South Africa for the past 3 years, citing severe post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. Dewani lost his last appeal bid earlier this month. Justice Department spokesperson Mthunzi Mhaga joins us now in the studio. Good morning, Mthunzi.
Good morning, Annie.
I want to double check with you first off. Exactly which date is Shrien Dewani expected to be extradited from the UK?
We are interacting with the Home Secretary in Britain, and we are now close to finalizing the process, and we expect him to leave London on the 7th of April and to land in South Africa on the 8th of April. Upon his arrival, we will make sure that the NPA and the law enforcement cause him to appear in the Western Cape High Court.
And tell us a bit more about the extradition process. How does it work?
Of importance is the fact that the offence was allegedly committed in a foreign country, and therefore we can't just go to UK and then pick him up and say you must come to South Africa. Yes. There are processes that unfold. We have to comply with the legislative framework that legislates or regulates the extradition of foreign nationals to our country. That is why the process has taken over about 3 years. It's been quite a protracted process, but we are relieved that finally it's reaching its conclusion.
And how the details of the physical movement from Britain to South Africa, how will that take place?
The law enforcement in South Africa with Interpol as well as the Scotland Yard are working close with the Department of Justice as the central authority in extradition processes that represent the South African government, and the Home Secretary in Britain with the lawyers of Mr. Dewani as well, to make sure that his return to South Africa is a smooth one.
Fabulous. And when will he appear in court?
We expect him when he lands on the 8th of April, that he lands in the morning. Obviously, we'll make sure that the afternoon of that day he makes his court appearance so that he can apply for bail, because that's his constitutional right. And obviously, there's a facility that isn't prepared to make sure that, because of the peculiar nature of his health condition, we have to make sure that the conditions under which he is kept in custody pending his court trial are conducive, so that at the end of the day he receives a fair trial like any other accused person, because South Africa is a constitutional democracy that ensures that everyone has a fair trial in a court of law.
And tell us, what charges will he be facing?
He will be facing charges of conspiracy to murder and defeating the ends of justice that relate to the murder of his wife Annie Dewani, which happened in Gugulethu in the Western Cape.
And tell us, where will he be detained during the trial? Do we know that yet?
The court will make a determination on his first appearance, the facility where he will be kept. As I've indicated, that his peculiar condition relating to his mental status still needs to be observed or examined rather by a South African psychiatrist, and the court will make a determination on his fitness to stand trial in a South African court. Because remember, in the UK they wouldn't make that determination because they were not the trial court. Only a South African court had to make that determination.
And tell me, do we know at this stage why Dewani decided not to continue his appeal process against extradition?
Look, we have not interrogated that, but there are no indications at this stage that he will be approaching the European Court of Human Rights. Remember, he wouldn't necessarily be appealing to that court because all the appeal processes have been exhausted in the UK. So he would, if he wanted to exhaust that avenue, would just be approaching that court to be discharged, citing human rights violation. But at this stage, he hasn't done that. That's why we're finalizing the process of his return to South Africa, which we expect to happen on the 8th of April.
On the 8th of April. And should he approach the European Court of Human Rights between now and the 8th of April, do you think there's any chance that his extradition could still be delayed?
Look, we have complied with all the legislative requirements that relate to extradition laws in South Africa and in the UK. All the appeal courts in the UK have confirmed the earlier decisions for his extradition. And throughout the processes, there has not been any indication or any argument that held water or that was strong to suggest that there's been a violation of his human rights, which is why I'm confident that even if he were to do that, he wouldn't succeed, given the fact that this protracted process has yielded the results that it has, which is now us finalizing the process of his final return to South Africa.
And seeing as it's been 3 years since Annie Dewani's murder, do you think that the trial will receive as much international media coverage as, let's say, the Oscar Pistorius trial is receiving at the moment?
Globally, South African legal system is recognized. If you look at the fact that George Luca, who's accused of masterminding the murder of Mr. Lolly Jackson, was extradited from Cyprus. Now we have a UK Supreme Court confirming the extradition of Mr. Dewani, which clearly indicates to you that the interest that this case has attracted is such that the judges do not want to err on this one, which is why I'm saying confidently that the international recognition that South African legal system has received will be seen in reality when the murder trial takes off in South Africa.
Fantastic. And do we know how long this trial is expected to last, or is that a difficult guesstimate to make at this stage?
It would be very much putting the cart before the horse, given the fact that the NPA and the legal defense of team of Mr. Dewani and law enforcement have to finalize all those processes. And once he lands in South Africa, all those details will be communicated, but it will be a matter that will be out of the purview of the Department of Justice, because we're only involved as the central authority on extradition processes, but the intricacies of the trial will be unpacked by the NPA later on.
And just tell us, just for contextualization's purposes, how long, what are the maximum sentences for the charges he would face?
In the event of a conviction for conspiracy to murder, direct terms of imprisonment. In some instances, it's life, but in most cases, when you have convinced the judge that there should be a deviation of the mandatory sentence of life imprisonment, some judges use their discretionary powers to impose another direct term of imprisonment or another custodial sentence that they deem appropriate in those circumstances.
And during the extradition process, South African legal representatives gave their assertion that Mr. Dewani would be treated fairly and would not be abused or mishandled in South African prisons. What were they referring to there?
There had been an argument that because of his condition, he may not be fairly treated in South African prisons. We flew out to London, some of the senior officials within the Department of Forensic Services. We flew in our own doctors, we flew in our representative from Department of Health to take them through the South African system in terms of incarceration of awaiting trial prisoners. And the courts there were convinced that we have a system that is a well-oiled machine. And when he lands in the country, he will be well taken care of. And I must emphasize the fact that the protracted process that relates to Mr. Dewani and the fact that it's taking this long to bring him here despite the judgment being delivered on the 3rd of March is this peculiar condition, because it's not like an ordinary accused who is well camped and all that. He is still sick, and therefore we should make sure that his smooth coming to South Africa doesn't pose any dangers to anyone. That's why we want to make sure that when we finally do it, it's above board and nothing untoward will unfold during that process of bringing him finally to our shores.
Thank you for those details. That was Mthunzi Mhaga, spokesperson for the Justice Department.
You deserve to know more.
eNCA.com